Tiny in All That Air, the Philip Larkin Society podcast.
Well, here we are, it's the 1st of June, and it is decidedly unseasonably cold out there. It's very windy, the sky is pretty overcast, exactly what you'd expect during a half-term week. My name's Joe, and I'm a massive fan of Philip Larkin and a long-time listener to the Tiny and All That Air podcast. I've appeared once already on the Horror in Larkin section back in 2021, and I got struck with a brainwave the other day. I often find myself thinking about Larkin's poems when I'm doing mundane things or I'm in certain places, and I thought, why not make that into something that other people could listen to? So today, and for the next few weeks, I'm going to try recording Larkin's poems in a fitting setting and talk about them as I go as well. Today's poem is going to be The Mower, and as I speak, I'm here in my shed getting the mower out for the first time this year. Now, don't worry, you won't hear too much of the actual mowing, and I have checked the long grass for any critters. The only things that seem to be in there of any real note are occasional presents from my dog, which I've had to dig out. The glamour of being a podcaster. The mower stalled twice. Kneeling, I found a hedgehog jammed up against the blades, killed. It had been in the long grass. I'd seen it before, and even fed it once. Now I had moored its unobtrusive world unmendably. Burial was no help. Next morning, I got up, and it did not. The first day after a death, the new absence is always the same. We should be careful of each other. We should be kind while there is still time. My own mower has indeed stalled, although thankfully not because of any errant critters caught up against the blades, just because the grass is so long it's jammed the bloody thing, which means I have to put my hand in there, and thankfully I have the luxury of unplugging mine, unlike Larkin, who I would have assumed was using a petrol mower, with all that would entail. When you think about the act of wanton destruction that we do in the name of having a nice lawn, it really does lay bare the stupidity of how we treat nature. And of course, from an eco perspective, keeping your lawn long is better for bees, better for everything, but the concept of cutting it down to make things look nice, it's a theme that I think we keep coming back to. And of course, a lot of Larkin's poetry about nature these days has a decidedly climate change and sort of eco-warning feel to it, which it maybe wouldn't have had in his lifetime. In many respects, there's a childlike quality to the poetic speaker in this poem. I've always found that sense of kneeling is a very penitent act, and yet also lowering yourself down to the perspective of a child, although it is darkly comedic, thinking of such a tall man as Philip Larkin, presumably in his garden attire, maybe his slippers, getting down on sort of one knee, and then potentially even on both, to really sort of inspect the damage that he's wrought. And makes me think a lot, actually, about my own childhood, about times when you come face to face with death in nature. I remember, not too dissimilar, was a sparrow that had been mauled by my own family Hogg, and definitely wasn't going to live, but it was gamely sort of trying to carry on even though it had only half a wing left. And I still remember my dad saying, "Right, come on, give it here, I'll take it down the bottom of the garden and make sure that it's alright." And my dad, being northern, sort of didn't really think twice about saying, "Oh, and go inside, so that you don't see it." And so I sort of watched him from the top of the garden and saw him walk down with this sparrow, place it down, and then suddenly get out a big spade and deliver the killing blow to the poor thing, which was clearly a moment that I'm still processing. But that idea of the accidental death, or the feeling of having killed, it's a horrible one. And you can really see, for all Larkin's sort of bluster and devil-may-care approach to people's feelings and everything that sometimes comes across with some of his letters or reported sort of approaches, I think he was a deeply sensitive man when it came to the plight of animals. And I think we see that through his drawings as well. I find the concept of looking underneath the mower and seeing this poor hedgehog, and the word jammed has this, again, darkly comic double meaning. It's not graphic, but it is very nasty, and that concept of it being jammed against the blades, almost you could think of like, telling a kid, "Oh, it's not blood, it's strawberry jam," potentially, as well as the fact that it's there, it's not supposed to be there, it's not part of the machinery, and yet there it is, because the machinery has come down into its world, its unobtrusive world. About halfway through now. The mower does keep jamming, which is quite good because it's given me a chance to really stop and reflect a little bit on different parts of the poem. The part that I find really interesting as we get towards that middle part, the middle stanzas, is the burial was no help. This idea that he went so far as to actually dig the thing a grave and to presumably perform some sort of ritual. But again, is he doing it for any other reason than to make himself feel better? It's a meaningless gesture, because he can't bring it back to life, he can't change what's happened. And that sense of things being unmendable and irrevocable, that is part of, I think, the grief within this poem. That sense of, God, I've done this now, but what can I do to maybe claw it back? A bit like how now we're sort of looking at climate change and thinking, blimey, it's going to get really bad. What can we do? I guess I could recycle a little bit more, knowing that as much as that's a great idea and should be done, it isn't ever going to be enough on its own. People in huge companies belching out emissions need to be the ones to actually really take charge, and they won't, because it costs them money. And that idea of, as we get towards the end of this poem, we should be careful, we should be kind while there is still time. It has a sort of Omen-esque sort of quality to it, really. While there is still time, does have a sense of foreboding, as well as the non-imperative should. It doesn't say we must, but we should. And you could read that as it's a direction, but also it's potentially a lamentation of the fact that we should be. It's what we should be like. If we were decent as a species, that's what we should do. But we know that it's maybe just a bit too much for us to do. A bit like Larkin, I can imagine, no proof of this. I can imagine Larkin, being hectored potentially by Monica Jones. You said you're going to mow the lawn this weekend, love. Come on, get out there and do it. And he shuffles out, cigarette in mouth, potentially last night's hangover still looming over him, and rather than stopping to look in the long grass, he just cracks on, wants to get it done as soon as possible so he can get back to whatever it is he wants to do. And then, bam, that lack of care has cost him. But also arguably delivered us one of the best poems in this collection. I always say to my students that reading a poem in situ, it gives you a deeper understanding not just of the poem but of the emotions behind the poem. And I think that's something that sadly in the classroom these days we've sort of lost a little bit. I think that there are a lot of teachers out there who understandably are always thinking about the bottom line, about their grades, about their results, being rather formulaic in their approach. And of course you've got a lot of students now that don't read poetry and never will, at least not without it being under some serious duress. But I always use this poem as an unseen poem. Whenever we're doing the unseen poetry skills, I always use the Mower. And you know what? I'm yet to have a lesson where it hasn't been effective. I feel like it's always effective. It's simple use of language, but masses and masses of meaning. And it always seems to connect. I find that there's something about this poem that has a power that really, really, and if you'll pardon the pun, really cuts through a lot of the worries and fears that students have about poetry that tends to manifest itself as indifference or a lack of understanding, or maybe just refusal to understand. And I find that with this poem, I come back to it each time and I find something slightly new each time I do. Well, that was my lawn, all done now, and now is the fun process of raking up all the grass, because the basket on my mower does not collect it anymore, it just sort of spits it out. Managed to get through without killing anything that I'm aware of, maybe a few bugs, and possibly had a near miss with my toes, but those are the breaks. If you've enjoyed this, and you are a regular listener to Tiny and All That Air, I will be doing a poem of my choice in situ, probably for the next few months at least, while I have a bit of time on my hands and I can do something like that. So if you are interested in me doing a particular type of poem in a particular type of place, do get in touch with Tiny in All That Air, and they will let me know, I hope, what you would like. Anyway, my wife is pointing ferociously at a pile of grass that I haven't yet put away, so until next time, folks, take care and be careful of one another.
This podcast was produced by me, Lynn Lockwood and Gavin Hogg, and the music was The Horns of the Morning by Wes Finch and the Mechanicals Band. If you have any questions or ideas for future topics, then please, as ever, do get in touch.
The horns of the morning are blowing, are shining. The meadow is wet with the coldest of dew. The dawn reassembles with a clash of gold cymbals. The sky hangs its vans out, the sun hangs in view. Here where no love is, all that was hopeless and kept me from sleeping is pale and unsure, but never so brilliant, neither so silent, nor so unearthly as earth grown before. Never so brilliant, neither so silent.